But if you want, you can what we're talking about.
Good evening. The meeting has been called to order, but there's already been a major mistake, which is I'm in charge of the IT here, it seems, which is probably probably not the best move. Welcome. I would like to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Lower Makefield Township Patterson Farm Master Plan Implementation Committee for September 24th. We have all of our committee members present. If you could just introduce yourselves, starting with Ron, to my right.
Ron Schmid, good evening.
Peter Solor.
Jenifer Stark.
Red Childs.
And Joe on Zoom.
Joe Camaratta.
Thank you, Joe. So let's call this meeting to order. It's good to have the full committee here. As you know, we met last month. We did not have a quorum. We'll talk about that in a bit. What I'd like to do as we call the meeting to order is put this task here tonight into context. And I'd like to share my screen. Okay. And on the agenda tonight, as we read ahead, we're going to have some recommendations. In order to put those into context as we call the meeting to order, I'd just like to kind of, for the record, say that the Patterson Farm Master Plan was approved in December of 23 after about 30 months of work, and with active input from the community, as well as from experts. The township spent over $135,000 with consultants over that 30-month period, and it resulted in a master plan. In February of this year, the Board of Supervisors formed this implementation committee to implement that approved master plan, and we had our first meeting in April, and the master plan includes a stage 1, which is years 1 to 3, which are obviously our focus. And there were 8 major initiatives within that stage 1. That is first, to identify and establish a dedicated, focused nonprofit to manage the property rather than having a municipality try to manage this complex property. 2, to conduct water abatement to keep all buildings as dry as possible. 3, to paint together with necessary light carpentry to protect and enhance as many buildings as practical and to show the community progress. 4 was to conduct environmental cleanups. 5, identify potential government grant funding sources. Prepare a submission for listing on the National Registry of Historical Places. To improve access for the farmer and the public, and to design a future nature trail. And 8, to identify and prepare a few buildings that are the early leasing opportunities. The committee formed into 3 subcommittees to take on these tasks. We have a National Registry submission committee of Joe Camaratta, who's also the chairman of the Historical Commission. The Building Protections and Enhancement Subcommittee, Fred Childs, Peter Solor, and Jenifer Stark, and the Nonprofit and Funding Subcommittee, Joe Camaratta, Ron Schmid, and myself. So as we form and discuss different recommendations tonight, I think it's important that they be put into the context of trying to achieve these first 3-year stage 1 tasks, as the committee has worked hard to achieve those, and we'll go into those in more detail in a bit. Before I go into the first agenda item, which is approval of minutes, I would like to just take a moment to recognize and congratulate Joe Camaratta and the Lower Makefield Historical Commission. They were recently awarded a Community Initiative Award by the State Historic Preservation Office for their preservation and work on Slate Hill Cemetery. So that was quite an accomplishment, Joe, and you and your team are to be commended.
Thank you, Dennis. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good work. So moving on with the agenda, the next item is the review and approval of the July 11th and August 8th meeting minutes. Fred, you've been acting secretary. Would you take those items?
Thanks, Dennis. The September 11th, we have the July 11th, meeting minutes that were distributed and reviewed and finalized. So they are ready for final approval to go back to the township for posting. So if we can handle that one separately first, since that was already pending last meeting.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Fred?
The August 8th meeting was an informal meeting since we did not have a quorum. I'm not sure what the protocol is for meeting minutes in terms of an informal meeting, but I did prepare minutes for that, and they were just distributed today. So I don't know that everybody's had a chance yet to review those. We can maybe table that until next time.
Yeah, I'm like you, I'm not real sure about the minute. I think they're more meeting notes, and we did can hold a conversation for informational purposes. So I appreciate your putting together those notes of that meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look at those notes? No. Okay, so let's postpone that to our next meeting, and that's fine. There were no actions there, but there was information provided. So thank you. Third item on the agenda, the National Registry submission, an update. Joe, could you handle that, please?
Yes, our goal is to have something done by the end of the year. We're falling a little bit behind in some of the work. It's being handled by the Historical Commission and some volunteers, and life gets in the way sometimes. So I'd hope to have a draft by the end of September. I will not have that. We're targeting that now for the end of October. But if we have a good draft, there's no reason we can't get the submission done by December and send it off to SHPO.
Okay, thank you. And Joe, you want to talk just for a moment about the official name that will be registered if the submission is accepted, which we fully expect?
Yes, I mean, we have thought a lot about the historical significance of the area, and with all due respect to the Pattersons, they brought the farms together, but it was kind of in the latter half of the 20th century. The historical significance really kind of starts back with Thomas Janney, and the land grant, and then him selling the land to the people who actually built the farmstead. So the recommendation was to move forward with this Thomas Janney historic agricultural homestead. It's important that we recognize two words in there besides Janney. One is that it's being recognized for agriculture because that's what the historical significance will be defined on. And it's also important to recognize that it was his homestead. It wasn't just some land that he had. He actually lived there. So that was the name that we will be proposing to the PA SHPO.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Joe on the historical submission from other committee members? No? Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that.
Are you welcome?
Next item, the nonprofit, I'm sorry, the Building Protections and Enhancement Subcommittee. With of the full subcommittee to my left here. I want to provide an update.
I guess there's two things here. The first is per Derek from the town, or per the township, will be getting the updated hazardous materials report this week. And obviously that affects some of the bigger decisions about and sequencing regarding work. The other item that has come out was a set of painting proposals that we met with, that was through the CoStars program, that came with the, came over from the county, I'm guessing, correct?
I'm not sure the source of that. I know they were, it's JR Painting that was a qualified
Yeah, PR Painting was their name.
PR.
So they provided a proposal effectively for just prepping and painting the buildings. Dennis here circulated a spreadsheet, which unfortunately I just now correlated to our naming and numbering convention because they clearly weren't following it. So they interviewed well. Their proposals, I guess in a big picture sense, their proposals had a lot of boilerplate from their standard proposals, which did not correlate necessarily that well with what our projects were here. They acknowledged a lot of that during the discussion process. Most of the products they're proposing make sense. I guess to dive into the weeds a little bit more, their boilerplate included power washing, which is unacceptable for a variety of reasons. Hazardous materials, containment, abatement, the fact that some of the wood's very porous and would take a long time to dry afterwards, or might even rip some of it apart. But they acknowledged that right up front before we even really got that far to it, when we started talking about it, that it needed to be corrected. The discussion on most of the finishes made sense. It should be noted that they're only proposing spot priming. Their main paint system they're going to use, they say they want to use it in a single coat. I checked the manufacturer's specifications, so it appears that what they intended to say with that was the manufacturer allows it to be done in 2 passes to build up the mill thickness while it's still wet. We also discussed in the meeting, let me pull my notes up because I'm doing this all ad hoc right now. The contractor recommended the painting occur every 7 years, which does seem pretty frequent, but it needs to be kept in mind. They're really not carrying they're carrying no structural repair, no window repair. And it should be only assumed they're carrying the minimum amount of wood repair that was immediately obvious. They are not going to go around and check for soft spots, replace siding. There's already existing conditions with that in a lot of places. That needs to be kept in mind while we're looking at their proposal and their price breakdown. It was also discussed what could get done this fall, given that it would have to be approved, the contract issued and so forth. It's a reminder to typical specification requirement, master spec requirements on painting, exterior painting are in the 50 to 95 degree range. One of the products they proposed could go to 35, but it's not the one that they were intending to use everywhere. So really they're limited by 50-degree temperature out there. So I guess the next thing up would be anything else people in the meeting want to bring up that they overheard that they want to bring up about that here. And then I guess we can have a discussion about their proposals, priorities, and what we want to consider. Their overall pricing is in the neighborhood of $250,000. So that relative to our budget if we were to look at it as all. So anybody else was in the meeting that wants to add
I
in
mean,
here?
the discussion during that interview with the contractor, which it included David Kratzer and Derek Fuller, the issue of there's a trade-off to be made, I guess I would say, and that is doing this kind of painting, which is encapsulates the lead on the surfaces is the intention. In some ways, it seems premature if you're not going to do all of the carpentry work that it would necessitate. You're still gonna have some spots that need carpentry attention. On the other hand, if we wait and don't paint and seal some of these external surfaces until all carpentry is done, it's going to deteriorate further. It's going to be years before, it gets to everything. The 250,000 was for all buildings, and this committee provided to the township a subset prioritization, I think, of those buildings that we would kind of put towards the top of that list. But the proposal, and Peter, Jenifer, I'm interested in your reactions, was described to me as price-wise is very reasonable given what they're doing and the extent of the number of buildings, or it was characterized that way. But I think we're all uneasy painting virtually everything at this stage. But there are some buildings that clearly would benefit substantially from this encapsulation of the old paint. Thoughts, conversations?
I'd like to hear other people's opinions here on the board, because I'm strongly opinionated and I don't want to be running roughshod over everybody. There is, just to bring it up again, there is a big trade-off here between doing this work now, which will help, but there's still going to be, this isn't fixing the windows, this isn't fixing the rot for the most part. So if there's water getting in some way, it's going to deal with some of it. It's not going to deal with all of it. We're not stabilizing the building structurally. The trade-off is that it's going to take a long time to get plans together and go out for bid to actually do a comprehensive carpentry repairs on all these buildings and go through that process and public bidding on it, or come up with some other arrangement through the township where it's another set of maintenance, but it had to be a clearly defined set of work. So those are the trade-offs. I guess the other side of this here is that it is broken down by buildings. So maybe it's some buildings and not others, which I know is some of the email exchange that members of this board have been having.
Right.
Can you,
I mean, if I was to say we're going to approve their proposal, I have a bunch of caveats I would include that the township needs to deal with in finalizing the proposal in order to deal with their boilerplate.
this is certainly not my area of expertise, but how did we arrive at the decision of letting them the contract? Or did the township, what was the process of arriving at this decision to work with them?
To get the bid?
Yeah,
To get the proposal? The town, one of the goals was to paint as many buildings with light carpentry as possible.
okay.
So the township took the initiative to go out and go to a qualified supplier and get some specific bids, because otherwise we're talking in vapor.
Right.
So we have specific numbers by building and proposals by building. That was the genesis.
And this was the best bid that came in.
Okay, don't know the situation on other bids. This is as far as I'm aware, it's the only bid, but here's some clarifications. It's not prevailing wage. because they're treating it as maintenance, not as building improvements. The township came back with that. So,
Right.
because to me, the number's low under the circumstances, and that was the explanation there. It's a commercial painting company with a long resume, not a lot of historic buildings. They did provide a couple of historic buildings, one of which was on the National Register. The other two were not. The Bristol Borough
Mhm.
did qualify for that. In the discussion, they certainly knew painting and they knew the products and materials they were using. But I would not say that they've done a lot of historic work. So, I mean, we don't have to accept it. It's out there as a proposal. And I guess the question could be asked, it's unfortunately, Derek and Dave aren't here, like how much outreach did they do on this? So.
Right.
Does that help, Ron? Because I know those
Yeah,
are questions.
It helps some. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think through if, both sides of the fence here. Number one, if we walk away from this, what's the time frame of getting a whole bunch of new bids and getting started on this, which is, our objective all along.
Right.
And number two, they may not be the best, but how bad are they?
I wouldn't characterize them quite that way. I mean,
Okay.
they're a professional, qualified contractor, which is one of the reasons why multiple bids weren't needed. They're a professional, qualified contractor.
With lots
I
of
think-
public work experience. They don't have a lot of historic experience, but a lot of public work experience. I went and
Right.
checked them out.
Right.
Checked out their
And-
resume, their online history,
Mhm.
Better Business Bureau, all the rest of that.
Yeah, no, and thanks to Peter's diligence, he called out and the unique requirements of this project, which they readily admitted, they would address, but they didn't adequately address in their proposal, and they would have to revise that proposal to be sure that what was said on the call would be articulated in any final proposal before it could be accepted. So I think.
But to your point, Ron, it might not make a difference if we were to say we want to see if the township could come up with more quotes. I don't know how they would do it. I don't think they want to publicly post it, but that's a question for Dave and Derek. We have a very limited window weather-wise. If we were to make a recommendation to proceed, it would still have to be finalized, approved by the board of supervisors, which would only leave at best a couple of weeks of work that could get done this season. So,
Jenifer?
Okay. I think that we owe the project some evaluation because we do have some buildings that are paint ready. And I think that we should proceed with those particular buildings. I think that we owe the community a process that is in the right order. And if we need to do some extensive carpentry repairs, I really don't want a painter looking at that area and just slapping paint on it for the sake of slapping paint on it. So I'm an advocate of taking this proposal and parsing it apart and accepting the buildings that are ready to accept paint as their scope of work. And then let's work on creating a scope of work for the buildings that need wood repair so that we have something that can be bid toward.
just as a reminder, the conditions report is a good place to start because that consolidated the previous engineering reports and then I added to that. And I don't think anybody's done any further research since then.
Right.
Some of those buildings will require an architect or architect and or engineer in order to finish these because there are structural issues. So. And it would have to go out through the public bid process. So that will take time. Mhm.
But
do
there are-
all of those
do those-
structural
Go ahead,
issues,
Joe, sorry.
I understand, Peter, your point about the structural issues, but would all of them be undo the effect of the painting, meaning that you could have structural issues that you need to do that are interior to the house, and it wouldn't necessarily be, impact the painting of the house.
I'll give a good example because it was in their proposal and we brought it up in the interview. The southwest corner of Satterthwaite House, they took pictures of a few specific issues and basically said, we're going to do superficial repairs here. But they took a picture of the southwest corner post of Satterthwaite main house, which is structurally failing. They didn't know it was structurally failing. They were viewing it as more standard modern day construction, not balloon frame like it is. And that corner post needs to be Dutchmaned in, which means taking that corner apart.
Right.
And that wasn't considered in their status there. And I think this really is a big board discussion here. Almost every building out there has some level of repairs are needed. Some buildings are pretty minimal, but they still have repairs. I mean, the question of what it is we want to do at what sequence is there's a lot of chicken and egg here. And unless there's some surprise and there's a building that turns out to be clean from this hazardous materials report, they all are going to have that issue that any work we go back to, even if it's encapsulated, whatever work we go back to is still going to have to be done by a contractor that's certified to do the work. Lots of contractors are. I'm not saying that that's an overall problem. It's just that it's something that has to be kept in mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a trade-off between trying to get something done and visible for the community, but not waste, tax money or whatever money it is funding it, and have to redo it again later. And I agree with Jenifer's assessment. I think if we can identify specific buildings that don't require major effort, that we should proceed with that. Obviously, there's economy of scale. If they can have a crew out there and cover, as much as possible within a couple weeks' time versus, back and forth off and on, some now and then some next year, then there's cost involved with that as well. But
Yeah, I tend to agree with that approach of, there are buildings that are more ready, and with only light repairs, it would be productive to paint. What I don't want to do is dumb down or slow down the process to the lowest common denominator of structural repair that's needed. So therefore, nothing on the farm gets out of the 15 structures get painted because the last one still has structural repairs. So we have to stage this, and I think between the structural report that Peter has provided, and I think this committee can prioritize or choose those. It's probably 5 or 6. I'm thinking off the top of my head. I don't know buildings that would be appropriate to move forward on. And Joe, Fred, your economies of scale, they did price it by building. So we can pick and choose, the menu. We want 3 from column A and 1 from column B kind of thing, without impacting the costs. So
I just want to add one last point here. If we go ahead with painting, no matter what, we're going back to the building at some point for some repairs. There's no way around that. It's just the level of repairs that would need to be done. For instance, say that obviously Satterthwaite Farm has a huge amount of the house has a huge amount of wood repairs that need to be done on it. And it probably doesn't make sense to paint it, but the packing shed, yeah, the windows need to be repaired there, but maybe it makes sense to go ahead and paint there and deal with the windows later. So.
The other factor to consider is what comes out of the report that hopefully we see at the end of the week on the hazardous materials and whether that impacts may or may not, in some cases, may not have any impact, but something else to consider.
So,
Just also point out that there's a cost to doing nothing, right? I mean, those materials are degrading and it's not getting any better, right? So the longer we wait, the more they will degrade. But I agree with Peter's assessment. I think we need to be rational in terms of why. I mean, windows in general aren't treated differently anyway. When I did work up here at Shelburne Museum, we had a separate group of people that worked on restoring windows than that worked on painting structure. So I wouldn't not paint something because the windows need to be redone, but I also wouldn't not repaint it if just only a section of the house. Like you said, Pat, like Satterthwaite's a little bit different because it has some major issues, but if it's just one portion of the house or one portion of the building that needs to be repaired, painting it is still better than not painting it,
I think from my point of view, I liked where Jenifer was just coming out on this. It seemed to me to be a good partial, we get a start. We don't go all the way. We take care of some of the concerns that Peter has. And we also go back to the township and get some of their input and see what the results of what comes in on Friday. So that would be where I kind of watch out.
okay. Thank you. So with that conversation, if I could, Jenifer, could you try to articulate a motion that kind of gives this committee the assignment to both select those buildings that should be considered for painting and to modify the proposal to do so to the township? Could you? I think you've stated it pretty clearly.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend that the township approach the contractor who prepared the proposal and ask them to modify it to the extent that only the buildings that are paint ready be included in their value for their proposal.
We have to define that, though.
Well, true,
Right.
true.
Yes.
But I know they did walk around and look at everything as well. So they may have an opinion as well.
Mhm.
So that's my motion.
Is that motion clear for everyone?
No,
I
I'm
don't know.
struggling with paint ready and who's going to define that. Because I think as we went through this discussion, I think I might define it differently than other people might define it. So to me, that's what I'm struggling with. What does paint ready mean? Who's going to make that definition? Who's going to make that determination?
Joe, I'm with you on that. And maybe we're not at the point of making a decision on that proposal here. I think there's definitely a point to what Jen's saying about
Oh, yeah.
reaching out to them and asking for their opinion. They did break it out by building. Again, that has clearly been stated. The other thing is there are things that they need to clean up in their proposal anyways. And I have a list of those conditions here, like removal of power washing, a statement of power washing will not be done.
Right.
Buildings are to be scraped. Painting activities performed on, I have 4 or 5 contingency items here. It probably is worthwhile asking for their opinion on their stuff. And we have that spreadsheet that Dennis was circulating around, which I'm going to recirculate around again here with the names updated to be consistent with the naming convention we've been using.
Thank you.
I think that, again, we can all weigh in. I think that's what Dennis was trying to do before, and I think that makes sense. I think we all have somewhat of a sense of what buildings need more work or less. And if you don't, there's hundreds of photographs that have been uploaded to that share file site that we have that I've done. And I've got that spreadsheet, which I can circulate around again too. And Joe, I think you're right. I think they're different, we're all going to have somewhat different. I think in some things we're going to generally agree on. I think in some things there might be a difference of opinion. So Dennis's point scoring system might be a way out of that. And I think we just maybe accept the fact that we're not going to get any painting done this fall because we're under the gun here.
Yeah, I think trying to get painting done this fall is completely unrealistic, given the calendar and the temperatures and the efforts that need to be done before actual contracts can be signed. So let's try to put a ribbon on this topic and say, we'll ask the township, we'll ask the township to have the contractor revise their proposal consistent with the phone call and resulting notes that Peter has about the revisions to the proposal. B, this committee will provide, each committee member will provide their own assessment of those buildings that are at the top of the list, the priority to be painted, a la the spreadsheet that I circulated. And C, we will ask the same type of question of paint readiness to the contractor and to the township to weigh in. So between the contractor weighing in on those buildings that are most paint ready, where they feel, their very light touch carpentry is sufficient, the township weighing in and this committee weighing in, that we'll be in a position to make a recommendation by next month's meeting on that subset of buildings to be painted and the proposal subject to the revisions be approved. Is that comfortable and adequate? Everyone good with that? All right.
Yes.
Seeing
Can I-
heads nod and hearing no objections, let's
Dennis,
Let's
can I just
move
ask one question? And given the fact that we don't know exactly about the lead paint issue until we get the report, but the presence of lead paint on the buildings themselves, how does that impact volunteers or people or, groups that we lease the buildings to doing preservation work and cleaning painting on those buildings? Do we just have to warn them? Do we have to warn them as to the appropriate procedures? I guess that kind of factors into my thinking a little bit around how to do the point, how to assess points, because when I look at that, I think, wow, there's some big buildings like those barns where it'd be great to have professionals come and do that because they'll bring in a lift and all. And there's other buildings that are one-story buildings. And I'm thinking, well, you can have a group of volunteers come in and paint those. I just don't know how we should factor in the presence of lead on those buildings.
I believe that almost all the buildings have lead paint, which I think is what the report's going to show. I think, and I don't remember exactly which buildings. I think maybe the small garage behind Satterthwaite didn't look like it had any lead paint on it to me. Obviously, that was a visual, and rubbing the paint's not the actual testing, which they're doing. But almost all the buildings, with one or two exceptions, have lead paint on them. And unless you can be a certified contractor. You don't have to be an abatement professional, but you have to go through the CPA-led professional training class to be a contractor to do work on something that's got the lead paint. So really it is limited for what volunteers could do as far as painting goes, except for an area where that's already been done.
Okay. Thank
Or
you,
we
Peter.
know that it doesn't have lead paint on it. Encapsulation is a perfectly fine technique for dealing with it, painting over it, but
it's another benefit of getting some of the painting done and not waiting till it's, we can do one size fits all. Okay. Are there, in the, Jeff Herco was raising his hand. Do you have a comment, Jeff? If you want to make a comment, could you come to the microphone? Otherwise, it's not going to be recorded on the Zoom recording.
yeah, you mean lead RRP, not full-blown lead removal and disposal. It's two different categories with the state for license.
So I am certified in the lead removal and disposal. And as to answer Joe's question, as long as somebody is certified in that, they can train other people that are on the site for the same thing.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. All right.
Dennis,
Let's,
I had one other thing since we're
Yes.
talking. I thought of an idea. When you said that this painting work is being done under the auspices of being maintenance, I would like to ask the township what repair work would also fall under that definition of maintenance and see how far we can get with that kind of effort. And then we'll find out what the delta is for work that's true structural, serious
Right,
framing.
right.
Well, it's more than just structural framing. It really does going to require probably bringing an architect out there to define what our limits are, what we're going to do for windows and that, and actually provide a biddable scope of work. I mean, there's a lot of work,
There-
a lot of
There's a
work
lot
out.
there's a lot of work,
Right.
but there's a lot of work that is truly, could be classified as maintenance. When you've got like a
I mean,
little,
if you repair a window,
yeah,
that maintenance,
The windows are unfortunately, most of those windows are going to be expensive.
not those windows, just if you repair a window, is that maintenance?
Depends on what you mean by repair.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, most of those windows, most of the windows out there that need repair are significant level of effort.
I
So-
understand, but there's a wide variety, there's a wide range of age to those buildings, from a cement block building from the 50s to
yeah.
an old barn from the, mid 1800s. So we can't paint with too broad a brush is.
No,
my-
I understand
Yeah.
that, but there'll be no end of arguments unless we provide a very clear scope, which probably means architectural drawings, unless it's utilizing volunteers, or in this case, we just take what they provide as part of their light effort. To provide a definition, I think is going to get really hairy. I've been on enough historic restoration
Well-
projects to know that the dispute over how many window sashes or what
No.
percentage of siding gets replaced.
I'm not
And
talking about that.
No, no.
First,
But
I'd like,
several buildings have set percentages of siding that need to be replaced.
I understand that.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is I'd like to find out what the definition of general maintenance is with the township, because
Or the
I'm
government
curious about what
entity.
scope
Yes.
could be tackled in that manner.
The government agency status of our township already complicates things. I think this citizen committee group should try to be practical and let them stop us when it comes to regulation or standards, and not define any standards that are greater than what they would have to adhere to. Otherwise, we're just exploding our expenses, and the probability of success of repair of any building goes down as the expense goes up. And so we just have to strike a balance somewhere. It clearly is not my expertise, so it's easy for me to say that. But we do want to keep it as practical as one can while doing it correctly.
Again, I don't disagree. It's just that saying minor wood repairs and leaving it as kind of that amorphous blob without providing a very specific definition and scope is going to be no end of dispute.
With who?
If it's contracted out.
Mhm.
So it requires providing a very specific delineation of what
Right.
is going to be considered as part of it.
understood.
And then by building, how much is expected at each building.
Right.
It's painting's relatively easy compared to that.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So
Okay. All right. Anything else on painting? Otherwise, is any other update from the building enhancements subcommittee?
I don't have any.
No. No. All right. Thank you. 2 subcommittees down, 1 to go. All right. The nonprofit funding subcommittee, we've been working on a variety of fronts. And as reflected in the agenda, there are 3 recommendations that this committee wants to debate and potentially put forward to the Board of Supervisors. The first recommendation, as you see under A there, 6A, is a formation of a nonprofit entity for the improvement and property management of the Thomas Janney Homestead Historical Agricultural District. That single sentence represents several months of work and interviews and homework by Joe, Ron, and I, mostly Joe and Ron, on trying to identify potential nonprofits that could or would take on this assignment. Between the three of us, we've talked to many nonprofits, nonprofit associations, lawyers for nonprofits, networked deeply into that community. And we're quite confident that there isn't an existing nonprofit sitting out there that is willing to say, yes, we'll expand our charter and just take on this Thomas Janney Homestead Historical Agricultural District as a project. It's too large and, quite frankly, in too raw a state. Perhaps if this property were in better condition and didn't need the extent of capital investment that's required, and had more active structures than the two single structures right now devoted to art, that could be feasible, but realistically, it's not. That has led this group to that recommendation. And let me bring up that document again. So, based on this work, and maybe we need to pull that up a little larger. The first recommendation is to formulate a nonprofit entity, as I've just said. We have the rationale for that an existing qualified nonprofit is really can't be attracted. We know that private and public funding sources are available for this property that are critical to supplement the LMT funding, which simply can't do it on its own. A nonprofit dedicated to this property would be in a much better position and in a position to attract that supplemental funding, both in terms of grants as well as contributions. We have discussed with the township and as a subcommittee a new capital campaign that needs to be started and getting underway. That should be done under, it needs to be done under a 501c3, of course. And you know, as we work through this, the LMT staff are in concurrence with this recommendation. So the action that we'll request out of this committee, if the committee agrees, is that the committee, in cooperation with LMT, file the paperwork to create a historical Janney Homestead Foundation. We can play with that title, but that for the purposes of managing, funding, improving, and engaging the community with the Thomas Janney Historical Homestead Historical Agricultural District. Such a filing will cost estimated about $2,600. It's filed with the state. That it's a matter of weeks to do that. It then needs to be filed with the IRS. The IRS administratively can take up to 6 months, but we've been strongly advised that that's not necessarily a constraint. If it's filed properly, it will be approved. And when it is approved by the IRS, it'll be backdated to the date of application. So the entity can begin to to function and or raise funds perhaps prior to that. So that is a recommendation. We circulated this document to the committee, and I'd like to have the committee discuss this, refine it at this point. Conversation?
I think it's certainly a good recommendation, and it raises, I think, some questions because of the, the size of the task and the extent of what this new organization would have to handle that some others typically don't. Everything from lease management, property management, fundraising, overseeing potentially 2 sub
Tenants?
tenants.
Yeah.
It's going to be critical to not only for us, but other experts in this area to come up with the right details and specifics of this organization and what kind of skill sets are needed.
We have worked with Pano, P-A-N-O. Ron, you're most familiar with them. You want to describe Pano? They provided some of that counsel.
Pennsylvania Association of Not-for-Profit Organizations. We did it on my behalf because I was Pennsbury Manor. We've had several discussions with them, and they certainly outlined for us very clearly the uniqueness of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be a 501c3, which normally does marketing and fundraising, but then also manage others. So it is indeed unique, and you're absolutely right, Fred. We would have to, in terms of roles and relationships, we'd have to be very clear from a get-go, the roles and relationships between all 3 of those organizations and the township as well.
And the Pano has provided a what they call their requirements matrix, I think it was, of different skill sets that would be useful for such an organization via board structure or other structure, but primarily through board membership. And Joe and Ron and I have refined that and tried to draft something that if the recommendation goes forward, we would put forward as what we feel is the beginnings of a board and the kind of expertise and talent that the board would require.
And just to add to that, their recommendation for us was to work with Harbor Compliance, they're called, who work with many not-for-profits across the state of Pennsylvania. And they would do all the filings for us and be sure that the IRS and the state filings, that everything was up to snuff.
Yeah, the township has learned the hard way, I'm told, I'm not familiar with it, learned the hard way through working with the Garden of Reflection that, the 501c3s really need to be buttoned up, have current audits, all the paperwork, all the standard procedural things in place, or it becomes problematic. So this would be done right, and any nonprofit the township works with, is going to have to meet those pretty high standards.
Dennis, one of the things that we didn't specify, and maybe that's why there's an empty bullet point here, is what responsibility or ownership do we have over the farm? Is the idea to transfer the farm into the nonprofit for ongoing maintenance? Is to provide a 100-year lease? Because obviously that would be work that we would have to be doing. We would be fundraising to do work on those buildings. So what do we have have we thought that through? Do we have a recommendation about what that would look like?
To date, the discussions have been that the township has a lease today with Shoreland Farms. And the township is managing that annual lease. And that goes through the end of 2025. And that this type of historic Janney Homestead Foundation would not necessarily get involved with that agricultural lease, which is more
I meant
straightforward.
farmsteads in the- I meant
Is
the
that what you
farm-
mean?
No, I meant the farmsteads in the buildings. What would be the responsibility or authority that the nonprofit would have with response to those?
The authority, I'm not following your question,
guess-
Joe. And part of it is the speaker system in here is horrible, so
I guess what I'm
missing
asking,
every other word.
I guess what I'm asking is, does that nonprofit also own the buildings? Or does the nonprofit have a 100-year lease on the buildings? Because if we're to raise funds, it might be odd if you have a nonprofit that's raising funds for township-owned buildings. And I don't know, Ron, you may have a different experience with that at Pennsbury, so please chime in.
If you asked, does a nonprofit own the property? No. It would have a master lease with the township and have the right to do subleases and spend money on improvements.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, I think we should specify it would be an exclusive lease to the buildings. Then with the ability to sublease.
My only comment on that would be, I think some of those details, Joe, need to be worked out between I'll call it the super not-for-profit and the two not-for-profits that are managing certain parts of the property. Some of those details need to be worked out in terms of who in fact is letting the lease for a tenant.
Okay.
Yeah, I think those can be sorted out. I saw the question more along the lines of defining the mission and the scope and the responsibilities of the historic Janney Homestead Foundation nonprofit vis-a-vis the township. And in filing the paperwork and defining that and working with Harbor as well as the township attorneys, that's just work that has to be pounded out. It's not fully articulated here. This is more conceptual, and then we got to pound out the details once this is approved by the Board of Supervisors to go and pound out those details, I guess is what I would say.
Okay.
So I take it that the first step is to say, yes, we acknowledge that the creation of the foundation is the next step. Let's look to Harbor to help us figure out the structure and also their recommendation for who should become the founding officers. Not necessarily any one of us. I look for them for some suggestions, and then we can build on that.
I agree completely. Okay. With that note, could I make a motion that this committee make a recommendation to form this foundation to support the historic Janney Homestead?
So moved.
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay. All right, thank you. And then you touched on the last issue, which is if any member of this committee wants to raise their hand and become one of the founding officers of that nonprofit, that will be, I think that would be welcome, and you can see Dave Kratzer after the meeting. How about that? Because this committee has a lot of work to do. We're, as we said in the beginning, we're the on-ramp between the township running everything and a nonprofit foundation running nearly everything. And we're kind of that ramp to build that bridge and make that transition. Okay. Thank you. The next recommendation, you can see on the screen here, enter into preliminary lease discussions with Patterson Farm Preservation Incorporated on select buildings on the Satterthwaite farmstead. This addresses of our 8 initiatives, 1, 2, 3, 7, and 8. The rationale is that the early priority buildings are on the Janney farmstead primarily, not Satterthwaite, as the Janney site has the nearest term opportunities, the short-term opportunities. Nevertheless, progress at Satterthwaite site is absolutely necessary. Patterson Farm Preservation has expressed interest in leasing some portion of Satterthwaite and is the author of the plan to create an agricultural heritage center there back during the master planning process. Creating an ag heritage center is a long-term goal that will require substantial financial resources. Patterson Farm Preservation has reported to us they have limited financial resources at present, thus a staged, stepwise process for granting this kind of responsibility is appropriate. This provides an opportunity for the township and this committee to make progress at Satterthwaite in parallel and without conflicting with any progress at the Janney site, and the LMT staff are in concurrence with this recommendation. To be clear, this is a recommendation to begin these preliminary lease discussions. It's not our goal to go into the terms and conditions of the lease here. It's all still pretty raw and still in the works. But if we're going to enter into those discussions in good faith, I feel it's important that we have the Board of Supervisors concurrence and support that we do so, and that's why we're making this one of the reasons why we're making this recommendation. So, discussion, conversation around this. We've had one meeting and a couple exchanges of emails, but I think if we're going to enter into these discussions, we want to do so legitimately. Any? No?
No, I think we had a good first meeting. I think we're all headed in the right direction. We're all pretty well, I think, aligned as to where we need to go with this and the kind of urgency to put a mailbox there and to put lights in the windows to show the community that we're doing things. And so I think there's general alignment. Sure, we have to work out a lot of the details, but it was a good first meeting.
Yeah. And I think it's also important, this is a new stage for the Janney Historical Agricultural District and for Patterson Farm. And the attitude of this committee is the history is behind us, and I don't care about history. It's what makes the most sense from today moving forward. So let's start afresh and see if there's mutual interest that can lead to mutual benefit for our community.
How is this lease arrangement going to work with the 501c3? Isn't there a trade-off here organizationally?
The position, and this is again, a staging item. If the 501c3 for if the 501, the foundation were in place today, and that foundation has the right to lease and or sublease any building, that 501c3 would enter into a subleasing agreement with, in this case, Patterson Farm Preservation, to lease building XYZ for X period for Y dollars. And so the Patterson Farm Preservation Group in this example discussion is a tenant of the 501c3 foundation. And the 501c3 foundation is the landlord from the perspective of Patterson Farm Preservation. Remember, one of the goals is to have the township not managing day to day. And so that's what the 501c3 should do. And it's a lease, a master lease with the right to sublease. That's the vision.
So in the interim, until that is effective, then the lease would be through the township. And then that could be transferred presumably once the 501c is.
I think it's a race. I think the foundation needs to get up and going. Would be the easiest way to do it. If it has to be a lease with the township and then the township assigns that lease to the foundation post, because, you know, the sublease happens first. I guess that could be managed, but that's more administrative than structural. Should we make a motion that LMT, with the support of this committee, draft, exchange, negotiate a term sheet to lease a portion of the Satterthwaite to Patterson Farm Preservation, and if successful, enter into a binding formal lease agreement?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Abstain. All right. Let the record show. The third
Just so you know where I was coming from there, I think that the backup, the one sentence, I know you're trying to lump us. If successful, enter into a binding formal lease agreement. I think that's a separate action later on, but procedurally.
That we're not asking for any approval of a binding formal lease agreement now. Right. Right. Good catch. Third recommendation, to enter into a preliminary lease discussion, same concept, with AOY Arts Center on select buildings at the Janney farmstead. The rationale is that Janney farmstead has the best promise for creation of a community historic arts village, building on the anchor tenant of AOY. AOY has come forward and expressed formal interest in leasing, managing, enhancing 4 to 5 buildings, a subset of buildings on Janney, to create an arts village there, which is consistent with the master plan. AOY has experience at this site, is a credible sponsor with the community. Creating an arts village will require substantial financial resources and thus needs to take a staged and gated approach, stepwise process in order to grant these responsibilities. It wouldn't be all swung on at one time, same as the Satterthwaite property. This provides an opportunity to make progress at Janney in parallel with and without conflicting with progress at Satterthwaite, and the LMT staff are in concurrence with this recommendation. So discussion, comments around this, the structural questions that we just addressed with Patterson Farm Preservation would be envisioned the same. as with AOI, a subtenant of a subset of buildings. Again, conversations are early, they're raw, there's still a lot of definition to be given, but we want to enter those conversations in good faith with the backing of the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, I would just add that I thought our first meeting was very successful. We certainly covered a lot of ground. And again, I'll use the word, I really felt like we were aligned in terms of our thinking as to how to proceed the same way as it was with Patterson Farm Preservation. So I feel good that we have a good starting place now to move from.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important that the township and this committee representing the township be open to any ideas that help improve this property and help make this a valuable resource for our community. And so we're open to rational and likely to succeed proposals. And so we're grateful that these two nonprofits in our area have come forward and expressed that interest. Whether anything comes of it or not, there's a long way to go, but we're open to that. So, other conversations about AOI? Can I make a motion that we make the recommendation as presented and discussed to the Board of Supervisors?
So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstaining? Okay.
I think structural questions still need to get worked out.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
So,
very good. All right.
not building structural, contractual,
Oh, there's a
organizational.
lot of contractual, a lot of terms, a lot of details that we don't know. The motion is to enter into discussions to sort that out. So if I go back to the agenda, and sorry for the awkward transitions here, but I think I closed my agenda, unfortunately. Okay, so we're through that. Next item, any other business? Other business to bring up from the committee? No? Hearing none. Actually, I have one item on other business. Fred Childs has graciously been acting as secretary, taking our notes and distributing draft minutes and finalizing those minutes on behalf of the committee. Fred, are you willing to take on the formal assignment of becoming the committee secretary out of sheer momentum?
If there's no other volunteers.
Joe just turned his screen off. Okay, I don't hear any other volunteers.
Yes.
Okay, since he has graciously agreed, is there a motion that that Fred Childs be elected as committee secretary?
I'll make the motion that Fred Childs he's going to hate me for this, but I'll make the motion.
Okay,
I'll second that.
all right, very good. All in favor, say aye. You're not abstaining, Peter? You want? Okay, good. All right. Thank you, Fred. We need that. I really do appreciate it very, very much. Okay, at this stage, the agenda is the public comment. Do we have any public comment? No? We appreciate your interest. Fred, could we review next steps and assignments from this meeting before we before we close?
We've scheduled the October meeting for October 21st, Monday at 6 PM here, I believe is the,
Okay,
we had to make schedule changes due to several people not being available on the normal second Thursday night. So for October, it'll be the 21st on Monday.
and just a kind of a roll call check. Committee members, can we make the 20? I can make the 21st. Ron, you can? Want to be sure we get a quorum. Joe, are you asking a question or you can make?
No,
it?
I'm saying that I can, and actually can make it in person.
Okay.
6 o'clock, 6 PM.
Oh, it's
6 p.m.?
6.
Okay.
I can probably call in.
Okay, okay. Fred, you can make the 21st?
Yes.
Okay. Jennifer's checking her brains on her phone here.
I actually already had it in my calendar, so I'm way ahead of you.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Looking forward to a full quorum in October. Thank you. All right, Fred, carry on.
We did table the August 8th minutes, so we'll have to revisit that. I guess the one other action item that I have noted is is looking at the prioritization of buildings and coming up with or summarizing the critical structural issues. And if Dennis, you and Peter were going to send around the spreadsheet
Okay.
and ask for our input individually on prioritizing those.
Yes, Peter, if you've revised that spreadsheet with the new names, distribute that. And then the other action related to that is Peter to be sure to email Derek Fuller and Dave Kratzer those bullet items that you have of potential of issues that should be addressed in a revised proposal from PR Painting. And then and I think we'll have it covered. And we'll work with the intention that on October 21st, we'll be ready to make a specific recommendation on acceptance of some portion or rejection of all of that painting proposal. Okay.
Just two other things. Since the July 11th minutes were approved, I'll forward that to the township for their processing and posting. And I think.
Okay. Very good. We appreciate that, Master Secretary. Thank you. If any other business, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Dennis, I'm sorry.
Oh,
So the recommendations that we've made tonight, the resolutions, will be transmitted then formally to the.
I'll email those to Dave Kratzer with a copy to John Lewis and Dan Grenier, and then let them address it with the Board of Supervisors as they decide best. Okay. Dan being our board liaison and John being the president of the board this year. All right. Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Joe, thank you for tuning in from afar.
Thank you. Good to
Good
see
night,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.